The tile underlayment is on and cured, so now it's time to lay the tile. We've been thinking about this renovation for a long time, and always envisioned going with some sort of mosaic tile. But after a few trips to different tile supply centers, we decided to go with this long wood plank looking tile. It's got some cool grain on it, and it's like a bleached color. I've done a bit of tile before, but never a tile floor. Though one thing is consistent across the board when it comes to tile work. The placement of the first tile is crucial. That first piece determines where everything else will be. The manufacturer recommends that you offset the ends by at least 33%. In actuality, I did a little bit less than that and offset my ends by 15 inches. I started by laying out a bunch of tiles and making adjustments to get everything exactly how I wanted. The box that these tiles come in offer a few different suggestions on the layout. When I was pretty set on it, I marked a chalk line for the first row. There's a few different ways to cut tiles. In the past, I've used a scoring cutter or a grinder, which works fine. However, this time around, my buddy Dan had a wet tile saw that I could borrow. I gotta say, this thing was the bomb. It made quick work of cutting the tiles, and the slide into the blade made sure all of my cuts were square. If you're doing a job like this, borrow or rent a wet tile saw. Highly recommend. This isn't that big of a room. It measures about 8.5 feet wide by about 19.5 feet long, so roughly 165 square feet total. I went ahead and laid out most of the tiles ahead of time so I could make the end cuts before mixing mortar. This allowed me to troubleshoot any potential problems and double check that I bought enough tile. The door to the garage was going to get in the way, so I just removed it for this part of the process. Once I was happy with the layout, I pulled up the tiles to get them out of the way. All of the full tiles went in a general stack, and all of the pre-cut tiles for the edges were stacked in a specific order so they wouldn't get mixed up. This is the same mortar that I used for the underlayment. Because of that, I was already familiar with the ideal water to powder ratio. Having a second bucket as a wash bucket is clutch to clean the mixing tool right away. If not, then I'll be chipping mortar off of it before the next use. It's time to start throwing down some tile. Like I said before, the first row is the most important because everything else is based on that. From what I learned about applying mortar, you want the trowel lines to be the shortest distance possible so all the air can escape, and you have an evenly supported tile. I also buttered the underside of the tile with a thin layer of mortar. I was very precise with these first few tiles to follow the chalk line and markers that I had set. There's a bunch of options out there for getting the correct spacing between tiles as well as leveling them, so you have as smooth of a surface as possible. Some of them have you hammer in a wedge, which I wasn't too fond of. Instead, I got these mousetrap looking things. A black spacer sits under both sides of the tile. Then a plastic washer goes on, and the red cage screws down to tighten and make it level. Super quick and easy. Just gotta remember to put the spacers down before the tile. Next, I laid the 2 rows next to it against the wall. With the exception of a few inches next to the step, these rows will be entirely hidden below cabinets and appliances. After the first few rows were complete, the process was pretty much just rinse and repeat. All of my tiles were pre-cut, so all I had to do was mix new batches of mortar when I ran out. For the spacing and leveling system, I figured I could put them at each corner intersection, and that ended up working out great. Since this isn't a large room, I was able to get almost all of it done in the same day. The mortar takes a few days to fully cure, and then you can grout. Some of the excess mortar had squeezed up through the gaps, so just a day after laying all these tiles, I went through with a chisel and cleaned out the grout lines. I was extra careful, making sure not to chip the tiles. I crawled around the entire floor, checking every single line a few times. Now that the majority of the tiles were installed, the last two sections to do are the trickiest. The first is the skinny edge along the other side of the room that has to blend into the doorway. I cut these using a diamond-tipped blade on a grinder because there were some inside corners to do. The other section to do, which for me was by far the most difficult, was the step. It took some time to figure out how to make this look as clean as possible without any awkwardly large gaps, making sure I accounted for the thickness of the mortar. The outside corners of the step, as well as the edge of the door threshold, get a metal rounded edge. I cut the edges with a Dremel so I could be super precise. When the step and final row were ready, I mixed one final batch of mortar. Just as I was careful when measuring and cutting the pieces out, I was careful when placing everything. The step will be one of the most high traffic parts of the room. Nobody but myself has been allowed to walk through the room for a few days, and definitely no one will be allowed on this step until the mortar is fully cured. I was a little worried about it slipping a bit, so I used painter's tape to keep things steady while the initial set cured, and checked on it frequently over the next few hours to make sure it hadn't shifted. This was the biggest tile job I've done so far. It's not a huge room, but there were quite a few intricacies involved. Even with all that, I'm super stoked with how this turned out. I can't recall exactly how long I let it sit like this, but a couple of days later, I went to town kicking away all the levelers. A fun and easy step. I would definitely recommend using a tile leveling system like this. Easy to use, quick cleanup, and great results. I'll leave a link in the description to the one I used. Just look at this floor now. Jeez Louise, it looks so good. In the next video, I'll get into grouting. Okay, that's it for now. See ya.